Hello, today's video is part of a series of interviews I'm doing to help publicize the 2022 conference of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. This one is number 7, by the way. The conference is known as CSICon, and it'll take place in Las Vegas from October 20th to the 23rd, like you can see over my shoulder. Joe Uscinski is one of the speakers scheduled for this year, and I'm happy to have him here with me virtually today. Welcome, Professor Uscinski.
Thank you for having me.
For any viewers who don't know who you are, let me fill them in. Joseph Uscinski is a professor of political science at the University of Miami, specializing in the study of conspiracy theories. He's a co-author of the book American Conspiracy Theories and editor of Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them. He's also a recent fellow of CSI. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But what is that last bit? Editor of Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them. Is that a website, a magazine?
So I did a edited volume that brought together, I think, 40 scholars from across various parts of the world to get their perspectives on the topic of conspiracy theories.
Ah, okay. So you want to say anything more about your talk that's coming up?
Well, I'm very excited for it. I haven't been to Vegas since 2018.
That's when I saw you there. So let me read for the people what it's listed on the site. You're going to be talking, and the title is Getting Conspiracy Theories Right. It's scheduled for Saturday at 2:30. And the site says, conspiracy theories have become a topic of much concern given their involvement in political violence and other recent events. But what do we know about these things we call conspiracy theories? Are beliefs in them increasing? Are conspiracy theories driving deleterious political and medical behaviors? Who's to blame for our current state of affairs? And what should we do about it? So how did you get into this subject of conspiracy theories to begin with?
So I'd like to say that there's some romantic story about it, but there really isn't. In fact, a co-author of mine at University of Miami knocked on my door, I think 15 years ago, and said, "Hey, do you want to do this thing?" And my immediate response was no. I said, "It's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. No one cares about this. There's no social scientists doing it. I said, it's a waste of time and you're going to destroy our careers." And that response made perfect sense at the time, because if you go back to the pre-Trump era, conspiracy theories were, of course, around, like they're always around, but they weren't getting the media treatment they are now. And they certainly weren't getting the scholarly treatment they are now. And there really wasn't a lot of data to study it with. It's not like there was a lot of polling going on to study who believed what and why. So to me, it just looked like opening up a big can of worms, and there would be a big long slog ahead of us in order just to get data, never mind get results. And luckily for me, my co-author twisted my arm over the course of a few weeks, and eventually I succumbed to it. And he left the topic to return to what he normally studies, and I guess I'm stuck with it for eternity, it seems sometimes.
So what's the difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory? And like, how do you tell them apart? Like right now, it was just revealed a few minutes ago, pushed to my phone, that there is a new thing with the text deletions, right? It says key Trump Pentagon officials have now admitted that their texts have been deleted. So this adds to the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm hearing talk about conspiracy here. Now, could be that, yeah, they were directed to do that. Or is this a conspiracy theory in the making? How does one know?
So I'd probably put it as a conspiracy theory in the making, or a conspiracy theory now, depending on what you're arguing, and then a conspiracy in the making, right? So a lot of the argument in this area comes down to definitions, right? Everybody has a different definition of conspiracy and conspiracy theory, and everybody tends to apply those definitions sort of unevenly, depending on what the content of those allegations are, right? We tend to view as conspiracy theory accusations that are aimed at us or our groups, but we often tend to think of conspiracy as the accusations aimed at the other groups, because those ones are much more likely to be true, but not the ones aimed at us, right? So if you say, what am I talking about when I use these terms? How do I use them? I would say conspiracy is you have a small group of powerful people working in secret for their own benefit against the common good and in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud, right? Um, so Watergate immediately comes to mind, right, where Richard Nixon and his associates were undermining the Constitution, and then attempting to cover it up after that. Conspiracy theory has all the same elements, but it's an allegation that has yet to meet some bar of evidence, right? And everybody puts that bar somewhere differently. So where I set it in my work is that a conspiracy has been shown to be true, or most likely true, by the appropriate experts working with open data and evidence in that particular area, right? So to me, a conspiracy theory isn't necessarily false or crazy or irrational, or anyone who believes that there must be something wrong with them. To me, it's just, it hasn't reached a particular bar yet for me to call it a conspiracy.
So I recall a study done several years ago relating the number of people that would have to be involved to have a conspiracy kept secret, and the time that could work. Like the more people, the quicker someone's going to spill the beans. So do you recall that? Have you, given?
Yeah, so there was a philosophical study that came out about 20 some odd years ago making that general argument, saying, the more people you have involved in something, the more likely it's going to be that somebody's going to mess it up, or that somebody's going to defect and spill the beans because they are dealing with um, highly valuable information, right? So how do you keep a group of conspirators, to not screw up and to also keep their mouth shut? Well, the simple answer is to keep the group small, right? But if you keep it too small, then it becomes, well, how do you pull off what you're going to do if you don't have enough people?
There's a joke. The only way to keep a secret between two people is if one of them
kill one.
dead. Yeah, right. Right.
So yes, it's hard to keep secrets. Even things like office romances tend to stumble on this rock, right? I mean, how long does it take to figure out something? I mean, somebody's going to spill the beans or cue you in at some point.
Right.
And what followed were a couple empirical studies where they looked at actual conspiracies that had failed and say, how long did it take them to fail? And what's the relationship between the number of people that were involved in it and how long it took to fail? And essentially what the authors were attempting to show was that more people leads to a quicker failure time. That makes perfect sense. Now, I tend to buy into that general idea, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a really big conspiracy couldn't be true. There's nothing necessary about it, right? And at the same time, the evidence they were looking at was only the things that we could see, right? They were only looking at conspiracies that we knew about because they had failed and had been exposed. So, I don't believe every conspiracy theory that I hear. In fact, I tend to believe almost none of them. But with that said, I'm sure there are conspiracies going on now that we may not know about for some time, or we may not know about ever, right? We know they happen because some get exposed, but that doesn't mean that all of them are getting exposed, right? So what these studies show is that, if we just go by the ones that fail, then it seems to be the case that the bigger they are, the quicker they fail. But that leaves open the possibility of that we're just missing really successful ones that just happen to be big, but
that's interesting.
They haven't failed yet.
There's a logical fallacy, something like the toupee fallacy. I can always recognize a toupee. Well, how do you know that? I think, right? Everyone I see, that's a toupee. That's not a toupee, but you haven't tested it. You don't know the ones you missed. That's interesting. So how has the internet and YouTube specifically changed things? I mean, you've been studying this for a long time. YouTube's been around maybe 15 years, 20 years. Like I've heard Mark Sargent, the flat earth proponent, who started the current craze, I would say, with flat earth clues. He said that like all the people he meets in the movement came to it through YouTube. Like, every single person started out watching maybe a JFK assassination, which, yeah, maybe it was more than Lee Harvey Oswald. That's not paranormal. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But then YouTube suggests flat Earth, and these people get sucked into it.
So we have to be very careful with the claims that we're making when it comes to social media, because yeah, things are different now, right? Um, but there's always a new communication technology that we're using at any given time. So things are always different from what they had been previously. And it's always the case that we have serious concerns about the information being spread on whatever the new technology is. And that was the same with cable and TV and radio before that. And if you go back to the printing press, right? So there's always this fear that there's too much information and people are going to get the wrong stuff and they're going to act in really bad ways because of it. I mean, it's true that you can go to YouTube or Twitter or any social media and find conspiracy theories there. Does that mean that they are influencing anyone? That's a very different question, right? And even if the person who was pushing flat Earth happened to meet people on YouTube, that doesn't mean he couldn't have met them in some other fashion. I mean, groups were always forming, people were always meeting, people believed flat Earth long before YouTube. And, as far as flat Earth goes, it's not that widely believed as a conspiracy theory. And a lot of the conspiracy theories that are still very widely believed, I mean, majority beliefs in the US, came about without the help of the internet. I mean, only a few weeks after the assassination of Kennedy, 50% of Americans believed that it was a conspiracy rather than a lone gunman. By 1975,
15 or 50?
50.
Wow, that shocks me.
So by 1975, this had increased to almost 80%. And it stayed that way for a few decades, and it's only come down in the internet era. So what that shows is that you don't need the internet for conspiracy theories to be believed by large numbers of people. And even go before that, we had Red Scares, Freemason freakouts, Illuminati panics, if you keep going backwards. So whatever technology we're using now to talk to each other is not a necessary component of people having these beliefs or people finding each other. So one thing that we've done is just said, hey, if social media is driving people to believe conspiracy theories more than they have in the past, then we should be able to poll on lots of conspiracy theories and find that they're more believed now than they were at some time previous. We just don't find it. We just published a study with, I think, 40 some odd conspiracy theories in it. Many of that have been polled early in the internet era or long before it, and we just don't find consistent evidence of increases. In fact, we find more decreases over time than we find increases.
It'd be fascinating to see that detail, especially flat Earth. I mean, I think it's come down a little bit just anecdotally very recently, but 5-10 years ago, it seemed to be like ramped up beyond belief.
I mean, I saw one poll in France and it looked like, I don't know, 20% of French people were saying they believed in it. Sometimes you have to wonder, if you polled it again, would you get the same number? Right. So that's why before I get too nervous about any one poll, I, tend to say, let's poll it a few times, maybe with different question wordings, different sampling procedures. And let's see how sturdy those numbers are.
I looked at your Wikipedia article, and it says that you have argued that, quote, Republicans and Democrats are equally taken to conspiracy theorizing. Now, I don't know how long ago that was or if it's accurate. Vouch for that, please, first. And I guess if it's that, do you still hold that opinion, considering recent developments like QAnon, pandemic conspiracies, all seem to be on one side of the political spectrum?
Well, that's the thing, is that what I'm hoping to do in Vegas, since I'll be among friends, among skeptics, is to take on those topics that a lot of people in the audience might not already agree with, right? So I want to start pressing the buttons of things that people might already think are true. And hey, if we're truly skeptics, then let's get the evidence and then see if these things still hold together. So I had a study just published last week. It's causing some controversy on Twitter right now. But we put together 50 some odd conspiracy theories in the US, 11 conspiracy theories across 20 other countries. Then we look at general conspiratorial predispositions across a decade in the US. And what we find across different studies is that there is no systematic difference between Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals in their willingness to buy into conspiracy theories. The only difference is they just happen to accept different ones, right? So there are conspiracy theories that Republicans are going to believe in and Democrats will rarely believe in, like climate change is a hoax. But there'll be ones where it's Democrats who believe it and not Republicans, like anything having to do with George Bush or Donald Trump, right? So there the numbers flip. And we also identify a bunch of conspiracy theories where the left and the right are equally willing to buy in. So there's no correlation between belief in these. So one's about fluoride being a conspiracy when it's put in our water, or Holocaust denial, and things like that, right? So it's been sort of taken for granted, I think, particularly since Richard Hofstadter's work in the early 1960s, that was more the right evincing this sort of thought than the left. But the evidence has always been mixed. And what we tried to do most recently is put together as much evidence as we can to test this out. And the evidence is, again, sort of mixed. It doesn't really show what some people contend it shows.
Fascinating. So, speaking of like skeptics, and we're going to go to the conference, Skeptical Movement. There have been differences of opinion in the movement regarding conspiracy theories and which ones are dangerous and which should be ignored. A few years ago, maybe 4 at this point, there was an article published by Skeptical Inquirer, where this is going to be published, giving the opinion that if skeptics are pushing back on flat Earth, they're wasting their time. It's a precious time and resources. The whole gist of the article was, if we're concentrating on anything except for climate change denial, we're wasting our time and efforts. My take on that was at least twofold. I see that as an example of the fallacy of relative privation, right? So only my problem is worthy of attention by anyone. And also it assumes there isn't a connection, that people who get suckered into one don't get pulled into maybe more dangerous ones. What's your thoughts about that?
So it's, to me, I think it's I know it when I see it standard, and that seems to be what you're alluding to in terms of which ones are dangerous and which ones aren't. Right. And so if you ask anybody, hey, tell us which conspiracy theories are the most dangerous, everyone would have a different list. Right. So what that sort of tells us is that it's the same things that drive us to believe in conspiracy theories are also the same forces that drive us to think some are dangerous and some are less so. Some are more evidenced, some are less evidenced. So a lot of it has to do with just who we are, what our personalities are, what we already believe about the world, sort of driving these judgments that we make. I have yet to see any scientific accounting of what the exact consequences of any particular conspiracy theory is, right? And it gets really complicated because let's take something like something that's been prominent for the last few years. So lots of studies show a strong correlation between belief in COVID conspiracy theories and COVID vaccine conspiracy theories and vaccine refusal, right? So if we assumed that the belief in the conspiracy theory caused people to not get vaccinated, we could probably ascribe some sort of cost to those conspiracy theories, right? And say, okay, they're causing X number of people to not get vaccinated. That's leading to X number of infections, X number of deaths. We can calculate some value there and say, this is what the consequences are. But it's just, when it comes to establishing causality of people's behaviors, it gets very difficult, right? It very well may be the case that people weren't going to get vaccinated anyway, and then they adopt a conspiracy theory after the fact as a justification for actions they would have already taken.
So correlation as opposed to causation.
Yeah. So it could very much be that people are holding anti-vax views for a long, long time for a whole lot of reasons that have nothing to do with COVID conspiracy theories. Just, I don't want to be told what to do, or I don't trust the medical establishment in general, or I just want to be different. There could be all sorts of things going on with this person that would lead them to eschew the vaccine that have nothing to do with any particular conspiracy theory.
Interesting. Do you have any thoughts on which you think are the most dangerous?
I mean, I mean, I could do that, and it just probably wouldn't be that much different than anybody else's, right? Because I could say, well, election conspiracy theories are very dangerous, or anti-vax ones are very dangerous and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I'm not that convinced that if we just got rid of the conspiracy theory, all the behavior would change, right? Same thing with climate change. If we got rid of climate change conspiracy theories right this second, would climate change stop? No, I mean, the politicians who don't want to do anything about it would still not do anything about it. They just have a different reason for not doing anything about it, right?
Right. So most skeptics I talk about, people who are interested in conspiracy theories, are Americans, and I'm always hearing the local talk on that subject. But I heard that you organized an international conference on conspiracy theories. So what was that like? What was the attendance like, and how do conspiracies in other countries differ?
So it's really interesting. I mean, I like to put it this way: the Americans are exceptional in many, many ways, but our conspiracy theorizing is not one of them. So I guess that's the best way to put it. We're on par, it seems, with other Western countries like the UK and Germany and Italy. And my guess is, and it's hard to back this up with evidence given the circumstances, but there's probably more conspiracy theorizing going on in places where we're not allowed to poll, as opposed to places like this that are more open, right? And this gets to another interesting thing too, is that when you try to compare conspiracy theorizing across different contexts between different countries and different time periods, it's not always an easy comparison, because the conspiracy theories that are going to be meaningful in those places and times are going to vary quite a bit, and they're going to have a different relevance, than they might in some other place or at some other time. So it's I get asked this a lot, and I try to be very cautious with it. It's just hard to compare, right? And that's what was good about the conference, is that getting people from these other places to talk about the things they're seeing on the ground, so that we're not just saying, well, let's take 9/11 conspiracy theories and see what country believes this the most. Well, that's all fine and good, but that only tells you about the relevance of one conspiracy theory across all these places. That might not be the best measure of conspiracism in general in any one particular place.
By the way, what do you hear internationally about the what do they call the hoax? Well, that we didn't go to the moon, right? That it's all a NASA conspiracy. Because I can see people from Russia, former Soviet Union, being the most at disbelieving that, because they didn't want to believe they were beat. But I've actually heard some differences on that regard. So what have you heard about this?
So the idea that we didn't go to the moon, or that it was some sort of trick, tends to be one of the less believed conspiracy theories that I poll on. I mean, it's popular as a conspiracy theory, right? When I say the term conspiracy theory, people often think of, oh, Kennedy, moon landing, 9/11. It's one of the ones that comes to people's minds, but not that many Americans believe it. And the numbers I've gotten have been between 5 and 12% over the last decade, I think, which makes it one of the least believed out of the many dozens that I poll on.
And how about internationally, people who don't like America because
so I have not seen a poll of Russia, but I have seen a poll of France. And their numbers, I think, were at the time in 2018 3 times what ours were. So I think I had polled 6%, and they were getting close to 20%. So that's sort of the thing. some very conspiratorially minded people in the US will say, yeah, we faked the moon landing, but they probably think everything is fake, right? Most Americans aren't going to buy into that idea because that's a point of American pride.
Right.
We did this. This is our thing. They're not going to call that into question. But for the French, they're like, yeah, those Americans faked it. So, and I'm sure that's the same way in some other countries where there's some sort of some amount of anti-American sentiment.
Have you seen Netflix's Inside Job series?
No.
It's an animated series. It's set in a world where every conspiracy theory you can think of and paranormal thing is true. It's the main setting is the agency in the U.S. government that keeps it all undercover. And in fact, the moon landing in that series was sort of a hoax. We went to the moon, but they wanted to establish a military base, and they didn't want to know any that we did that. So then they released the thing that we didn't go to the moon at all. In fact, Buzz Aldrin is still on the moon leading the base, and the guy who's been on Earth, including on Dancing with the Stars, is some kind of an actor. It's hysterical.
Well, that's something of a theme for the conspiratorial. This is where some of these things sort of start spiraling in on themselves. Like, is the conspiracy theory, or was the conspiracy theory put out there by the conspirators to muddy the waters to keep us from catching on to their real scheme, whatever that might be? Right. So when you follow this rhetoric, it starts to get far more complicated than just, oh, we think it went to the moon. Like, and I've seen this happen with a lot of conspiracy theories. Even the word conspiracy theory is said to be part of a conspiracy by the CIA to stop people from believing in Kennedy conspiracy theories. And there's a few academics and a bunch of conspiracy theorists who make this argument. Is there good evidence for it? No, not really. But nonetheless, it's one of those things where some conspiracy theorists are quite cognizant of the fact that their ideas are labeled conspiracy theories. They're cognizant of their place in society, sort of being on the outside, arguing against the mainstream.
Right.
And they are quite adept at altering their conspiracy theories to explain their status or the status of their theories that they put forward.
What's the connection between conspiratorial thinking, conspiracy theories, and cults? I mean, specifically with QAnon, and there's religious cults which are based on some kind of conspiracy theory.
I mean, cults sometimes engage in conspiracy theorizing, and for reasons, think about it this: oh, we're a cult. There's X number of us. Our ideas don't seem to be catching on. Why is it? Well, because some arrangement is keeping us down. They're keeping our message from getting out there, or they're brainwashing everyone else, and we're the only ones that know the truth, but we've been kept down by some form of conspiracy. Is QAnon a cult? I think there are cult aspects to it, but there are a lot of aspects of QAnon that just aren't that cultish, right? There wasn't really there was some top down. There was a person, Q, putting out clues, and then sort of people on YouTube and Twitter sort of interpreting that for more people to engage in. So there was a pyramidal structure. Top down, but there wasn't really top down control. I mean, people could come and go out of the group as they wanted, and a lot of members disagreed about a whole lot of things. So it wasn't like there was thought control and one particular dogma that people had to go along with. So in that sense, it was a lot more decentralized than the sort of small religious cults that we tend to think about. But in a lot of ways, I mean, bringing up QAnon is right. It's something that has defied simple definition for a long time because it's online. It's kind of cultish. Is it a conspiracy theory? Well, sort of. It engages with a lot of different conspiracy theories. But at the same time, the people following it have developed sort of a group identity and a camaraderie amongst each other, right? Where we go one, we go all. And you don't find that with other conspiracy theories. It's not like, if two guys who believed Kennedy was killed by the CIA met each other, that they would be simpatico because of that, right? People believing in these other things don't develop a group sense of belonging. But QAnon did, right? And you can very much see that in in the postings of a lot of the members, that we've been doing this together. We've been watching things unfold and communicating all sorts of ideas back and forth. So in that sense, it wasn't just, for a lot of these folks, it wasn't just a belief in a particular theory. It was an activity. It was a fun thing they did. It was social.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time today. It's great to be able to record this for my readers and anyone else who stumbles across it on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thanks.